Hi, welcome back. And we are going to be starting week 6. This week, we're going to be going over some information such as financial management, budgets. There's some information about credit cards, especially for those of you if you've never actually had a credit card. It has some good information about the uses of credit cards and the ways that you can build credit, but also some warnings as to getting credit cards and some things that you need to be looking out for if you are ever considering getting a credit card and you haven't done that yet. Some of you have already probably gotten credit cards, you are already pretty savvy with it, but that's some information for people that maybe are not. And then there's some more information here about financial aid as well, because there are some of you that maybe would be looking for some additional ways that you could pay for school, whether it be scholarships, grants, loans, things like that. And a lot of times people are not really aware of the ins and outs of the different types of financial aid and some of the things that you need to be aware of. So you're using your financial aid in a smart way, basically, but also able to potentially get more financial aid, especially if some of the things that stress you out about school is the cost of school. And then we go into some sections about learning management, such as taking notes would be one of them. And there's some good information there that we'll kind of go over before we get into some of these activities you'll be doing this week. Mastering memory, preparing for tests. And then there is some additional information here, strategizing for different exam formats, because there's some good information there for some of you that would have some good tools as far as the different ways that some professors format their tests and some pointers and tips on how you could potentially do better on certain kinds of tests, depending on what kind of test you would be doing, such as like an essay format test, or if you were going to be doing testing that's more multiple choice, true, false, things like that. And then there is a PowerPoint that's at the very bottom of our weekly folder that talks about success in math. And that would be a good PowerPoint if there's any of you that kind of get anxiety about math classes. And that's one of the subjects that's a little more just a topic or one of your classes that tends to give you a little bit more stress. So there's some good information in that PowerPoint. Just some things to note since we're pretty much kind of nearing the end and we only have a couple more weeks of actual readings and assignments to do. And then the very last week of class, you'll basically be working on your final paper. One thing I do kind of notice as I've been doing more of the grading, like I just did last week's grading, is that some people are not really reading directions on the assignments thoroughly, and you're maybe answering part of the questions, but you're not going back to the reading to actually use information from the reading in order to answer your questions. Because last week, for example, there was several assignments that was asking you to go back to the reading, specifically the reading that would have come right before the assignment, and asking you to actually use some of that information from like the procrastination chart to answer your question. So I would say about half of you did go back to that reading and you used information from that procrastination chart. This is specifically for the exercise over procrastination that we did. I can't talk today. And so about half of you did do that, but then there were about half of you that just kind of basically made information, or you just explained procrastination in your own way, but you weren't following the directions as far as going back to the reading and taking information from that specific chart. So I just want to make you aware for the next couple of weeks, like with activities, please make sure that you are reading the directions thoroughly, and make sure that if it's asking you to go back to the reading to take information from that in order to answer your question, that you're doing that, because that's how people are losing, points here and there, is because they're not fully following the directions. So I just kind of want to throw that out there, just to hopefully the last assignments that we have coming up, that's something you keep in mind. So we'll just go ahead and kind of dive into this week with the whole taking control of college and life. And you'll want to do the financial management reading first. And then here, this activity that you're going to take, it is not a graded activity, and it's a very short quiz, but it's very good for starting out the whole topic about financial management. Because when you take this little quiz, when you click on it, you're going to see that there's a link. You just click on the link, and it's a financial quiz. It's been built into Canvas. So it's a very quick little quiz that you take. You're not really being quizzed. You're not being graded, but it's to kind of prime you for the whole thought process of talking about financial management, budgets, credit cards, things like that. So it's kind of a quiz that's gauging where you're at when it talks about financial issues. So please take that quiz after you do the first reading on financial management, and just take that quick quiz so you kind of have your starting point for talking about these topics that we're going to be talking about this week. And then your next reading after you do this, you're going to do the reading over the power of a budget. There's a lot of good information here about budgeting. It's not a very long read by any means at all whatsoever, but it has a lot of good information to give you a good idea, especially if you've never really sat down and made a budget for yourself before. And even if you don't have a full-time job, maybe you have a part-time job, or maybe even, you might be living off of financial aid. It's always a good idea to learn how to make a budget. And your budget doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be hard to do. And we're actually going to practice making a budget in the activity that you're going to do following this reading. So just go through this reading so you kind of get an idea about the standards for making a budget or starting your own budget for the first time, especially if you've never made one before. And then you're going to complete the activity that comes after this reading. So I'm going to wait for everything to load back up here. So the first graded activity is going to be this one called Creating a Budget. So when you click on this activity, it has some good information here. One of the coordinators at our school actually made this Excel spreadsheet that you're going to be plugging numbers into and you're going to be using for this assignment. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to click on this link here, and you're going to want to basically download this Excel spreadsheet to your computer. Even your phones may be able to do it. Most smartphones can support spreadsheets, and you'd be able to actually put the information in there, or even on your tablet. So just click on that link and save it. It's basically going to have all of the different categories, but nothing is going to be filled in because that's what you'll be doing for your assignment. And then once you have that downloaded, just go ahead and read the directions here. I'm going to kind of go over the spreadsheet and open it up and let you kind of see it while we're doing this little lecture video, just so you can kind of see what you need to be doing so you're not too confused about how you're supposed to fill it out. And I do put on here, you're going to want to use the information from last month because, different kinds of budget concerns come up every single month. So it's going to change, and you don't want to try to predict what your budget is going to be for this month or next month. What you're going to want to do is just, as best you can, record what you spent last month on certain items so you can basically build yourself a budget, and you can kind of see where you're at as far as how much you had of money coming in, how much you had of money that went out, and basically what was left over, whether or not you had enough that you could put some towards savings and things like that. Now, if you have already made yourself a budget and you have a pretty detailed budget, that's cool, because even though you may already have your own budget, go ahead and fill out this spreadsheet, but you can use information from a budget that you're already updating or keeping up to date, and that's fine. But you're basically going to want to do last month's expenses and incoming money in order to complete this assignment. And then I put on here too that if you currently do not work, and let's say either maybe a parent is paying for school or you're living with a parent, so you don't necessarily have rent that you have to take care of, or whether you're living off of financial aid money or anything like that, you can make this sort of hypothetical, and you can take information from the week 5 career research assignment that you did, and you could take that information and say, okay, if I do get a future job, let's say as a registered nurse, and you went ahead and you already looked up what the potential salary could be as a registered nurse, you could hypothetically make a budget based off of what you think you might be making when you get into your career field. And you can potentially use information, even if you live with a parent, you can ask them and go, okay, what do we spend per month on the mortgage payment or the rent, just to get information that you can fill in the budget, just so you can kind of get a feel for building a budget. So you can partially make it hypothetical depending on your situation if you don't currently have a job or whatever the situation may be. So just read through these directions thoroughly so that way you kind of can get started in building your budget. So what I'm going to do, I already basically pulled up the budget so you can see what it's going to look like basically on your computer or tablet. And so when you open up this money budget, you're going to see that the first page that's going to pull up is a summary page. So after we start inputting information, you're going to see that all of these numbers here are going to start changing. So the first thing, when you click on monthly income here, you'll see it'll pop up. Basically here, let's say whatever job you currently have now, if you make a certain amount per month or basically use last month, you would put in that amount here. If you have more than one income source, you can click next to each one. So here, if you don't make 2,000, let's say you just have a part-time job and you bring in $1,000, you would just highlight it, and then you would basically double click there, and then you can change the amount. So, let's say if you only make $1,000 a month because you work part-time, you could put that there. So, you're already updating what your income source is. And then when you click over here, when we click on monthly expenses, you're going to see that it has a bunch of different things already listed. So let's just say, for example, you pay your rent or mortgage, let's say on the first of the month. That's, kind of typical. So let's just say, since we're doing last month, you're going to put, okay, I made a rent payment on June 1st. And let's just say hypothetically that your rent was $325 for the month. So you're basically inputting information like this. So, your gas bill or your electric bill, you would put whatever date that you paid it. So you might have to go back and get some information from the bills that you paid, whether you have to look at your bank statement or whatever it is to get the information that you need. Gas for your car, your cell phone bill for the month, how much you spent on groceries last month. If you have to make a car payment, if you had to get anything fixed on your car, if you're currently making any student loan payments on your credit card, all of this. And then miscellaneous. So if you have other expenses that are not listed here, you can basically kind of compile them into the miscellaneous category and then go ahead and, put that information there. If you have a few other expenses that are not listed that you kind of want to compile into this one miscellaneous section here. So I'm just going to input just a couple of other numbers just so you can see how the summary page turns. So I'm just going to say, $120 on a cell phone bill, and I'm going to put $300 for the entire month on groceries. And I'm just going to fill in a couple just so you can see how the summary page looks. So when you go back to the summary page, this should update, but it looks like it's not doing that. Okay. I don't know why it didn't do that. Making sure it actually saved this information on here. Okay. I'm going to try saving it just to see if I can get this to change. I probably should have played around with it a little bit more before I... Okay. Well, let's see, maybe if I just refresh it, maybe it will update the information on there. Okay, it did not. So I'm going to have to play around with this a little bit more. Go ahead and download it, try to play around with it, see if when you save it and you save your information to it, if it will actually update this information here. You may have to do it manually, but it shouldn't. It should basically update that information as you go. So I probably should play around with that a little bit more before I started this lecture video, but you kind of get the point. I just wanted you to be able to see basically how you would input the information. So play around with it, see if it updates. You may have to manually update this part after you enter in your monthly expenses and anything like that, but it should update it for you. So hopefully when you download it, it will do that for you. Okay. So I'm back. Sorry about that. I probably should have played around with it a little bit more just so that way I could make sure that it was actually working correctly. If for some reason when you try to put your information in, if you have to manually update that first summary page, that's fine, but hopefully it will. But just let me know. Just send me an email if there's just a massive problem with it and it's not, for whatever reason, it's not letting you input information or anything like that. It's pretty easy to put the information in, but for some reason it wasn't updating the information on the summary page for me. So let's go back and just kind of continue on so we don't have to make this lecture video too terribly long. Okay, so back here in the week 6 folder, so you have a section that goes over credit and credit cards, and I believe there is some additional information here. So you can actually, as you read through this, there is going to be a PowerPoint here that you're going to click on. So that way you have more information about how credit cards work and how credit works. So it's just some additional information. So make sure after you read this that you click on the PowerPoint so you can kind of go through that a little bit more and get some more additional information on how credit works and how credit cards work, because it's really good information to know if you are considering getting a credit card, if you've never gotten one before, or even if you have one, but you've never really been taught how to use one well and really understand how credit works and how that's tied into the use of credit cards. That's a good PowerPoint for you to go through. And then this one is the one that has more information about financial aid, which for some of you may be a really good section where you're going to get some additional information that maybe you were never really 100% sure about because it wasn't fully explained to you, the different scholarships, grants, loans, things like that, and some specific information regarding those. So you can actually click on these links as you're doing the reading to get some additional information. And this one right here is specific to Rose State College as far as types of aid. So if you click on that, you're actually getting specific information that's not just across the board about financial aid, but it's actually pertaining to Rose State College. And then these questions here are just some reflection and discussion questions that you could potentially answer yourself, but you're not turning anything in for that. So make sure you read through that, and let me go back to our week 6 folder and we can kind of move along here. Okay. And then after that, we kind of go into more information about learning management. The section here on taking notes is really good information, and you're actually going to be completing this activity based off of reading this section on taking notes. So make sure you're reading this first before you start this activity on note-taking, the reflection and discussion questions. So I even specify here, make sure that you are reviewing that section of reading on taking notes, and then also make sure that you click on the PowerPoint on note taking and go through that PowerPoint before you answer these questions. And then you're basically just going to click here because you're going to get a text entry box, or you can do it on a Microsoft Word document in order to answer these questions. So please make sure you're using information from the reading and from the PowerPoint on note taking in order to answer these questions so you don't miss any points for not adding that information in. And then as we're moving on, you have a section over mastering memory and then preparing for tests. And then you have an activity after you complete this reading on preparing for tests to complete. So it's another reflection and discussion. And it's actually what it is telling you to do is read that section on preparing for tests and watch. There's a bunch of little short videos in there that have a lot of information. So make sure you watch through the short videos. And there's going to be a few links. So just kind of make sure you're going through the links as well and getting all the information. And what this one is doing is giving you a case study. So it's basically giving you a hypothetical scenario that you're using to answer these questions. And you're basically answering these questions based off of things that you have learned from the reading on preparing for tests with the short videos, the links that you've gone through. And then you're reading this case study and you're discussing you're using information from the reading in order to answer these questions, but this is your guideline. This is basically your hypothetical scenario that you're answering these questions on. So make sure you read through this fully so you kind of understand this person's situation. So that way, when you're answering the questions, you don't miss any points for that. And this one is also going to be a text entry box, or you can make it on a Microsoft Word document and upload your Microsoft Word attachment there if you prefer. And then after that, you just have these couple of other sections here that you're going to read through that are going to give you, this one I really highly recommend just because it's going to give you some information on specific types of testing formats and some tips and strategies for you to use on testing, especially if you tend to be the type that maybe you do study well, but you don't do as well on tests as you think you should. And sometimes it's because there's some other strategies that you could be trying to use when you're actually taking a test that could potentially be more helpful to you as you're taking tests, and you might be able to potentially do a little bit better on your tests that you take. And then for those of you as well that maybe have some hesitations about math, or maybe that's just a subject that you've never felt very strong in, this PowerPoint, when you click on it, is going to have some good information for you as well that could potentially help you be more successful in your math classes. So that is it for this week. Like I said, since this budget PowerPoint or budget spreadsheet was not working perfectly for me. Just let me know if you have any problems with it, getting it to update, but you may have to manually input information on that summary page after you fill out all the different sections, but it should still let you save it after you've put in all your information on your expenses and information about, your income and all of that. It should still let you save all of the information you input so you can basically still upload the spreadsheet to the assignment folder, but you may have to go back to that summary page and update it manually if it doesn't automatically do it for you after you've input all your information. So just be aware of that because that may not update like it's supposed to. It should automatically do it, but it wasn't doing it for me. So hopefully it will work better for you. And other than that, that is pretty much it for this week. So next week, just be prepared that we're going to start kind of thinking about the actual final paper, and you're going to be doing kind of like a pre-writing exercise to kind of prime yourself and get yourself ready to do your final paper. And then basically in week 8, that is what you are working on. You're going to have a folder that's going to be open for you to submit your paper. Just make sure that as you are working on your paper, use the information that you got from that career research assignment that you did. Basically, I think it was last week or maybe it was the week before that you did the career research assignment, because you already probably have some references that you can use from information that you got online. You already kind of have an idea of what kind of information you need to discuss. So you're kind of already on the right path of getting started with it. You kind of got over that first hump by just doing that one paragraph about information on the potential career path that you're trying to get yourself on. You probably already have a few references. So you're kind of already to get started on that. So you're going to do a pre-writing exercise next week to really get yourself ready to actually write the paper. Just make sure that if you do not feel confident in your writing skills, you do have the writing lab that is available to you on campus, tutor.com, that you will actually see here because it's available on your Canvas. You can go to tutor.com. So if you go ahead and write, let's say you write your paper and it's kind of your rough draft and you want someone to kind of go over it, maybe give you some pointers, point out anything that if something doesn't make sense and whatnot. And if you don't have someone at home that would actually proofread your paper for you and kind of discuss if there's areas that maybe need a little work for grammar, punctuation, or, some information that maybe you typed up that doesn't make sense, you could potentially use tutor.com because they do have a way that you can actually upload papers and get help with that. So don't ever forget that you have this over here in Canvas that could potentially help you. But you have the writing lab as well. Just make sure that you yourself are proofreading your papers. Make sure that you are capitalizing the first word that comes after the period, because I've noticed a lot of people do not capitalize the first letter of the first word that comes after a period from each sentence. And that's a very basic grammar mistake, but that's one that potentially when I'm going through and grading your final paper, little things like that, I'm going to be flagging it. And that's potential points that you could be getting taken off for your paper. So you want to proofread, you want to make sure that you're capitalizing things that need to be capitalized, putting commas where they need to go, making sure that you're ending your sentences with periods and you're not, using what I call text speak, because a lot of people do that. They just they don't capitalize things. They don't use commas or anything anymore. It's just kind of like the way that you do shorthand texts. And a lot of people write their assignments and papers that way. And that's going to be potential points that will get taken off. So I'm just kind of giving you that heads up now. But all right, that is it for this week. Just email me if you have any issues or questions. If you have assignments that you haven't turned in yet that are going to be late assignments, please start working on those and getting them turned in now, because if you wait till the very last minute, I'm going to have to be grading final papers. And then if I have a bunch of late assignments that I'm going to have to grade as well, that's potentially going to take me longer to get the final papers graded so I can get them back to you. That way, if you have any questions before I have to submit final grades, it's going to make it a lot harder. So if you have the opportunity, turn in any late assignments that you have not turned in. Do that soon. Do that within the next 2 weeks and do it as soon as possible. So that way I can get those things graded so I can potentially grade your final papers as quickly as possible and get them back to you. So that way, if you have questions, anything like that, you'll be able to ask me before I have to submit final grades. All right. Well, I will see you all next week.